welcome to the Dan Norton Show, on which I promote Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. It is Saturday, August 15th, 2026. I hope you can hear me. I'm waiting to see my... Yeah, looks like the audio is working. All right. So, I've got a couple chats already to address from Virtue Man. I will go straight to those. So I have a lot of topics listed on my background, and Virtue Man asked in the chat why I have abortion in the good category. Let me bring up his chats on screen so we can all see them together. I gotta just refresh that. Okay. So Virtue Man asks, why is abortion listed as a good in the thumbnail? I'm not against abortion per se, as though it was inherently immoral. In many cases, it is a necessary procedure, but only as a corrective measure. It's not as though abortion is part of the moral standard of man's life and something we all need to achieve to live happy lives. In that sense, it's not good at all. Okay, I've gotten this question a few times, and I think it's a reasonable question. And the way I think about abortion is it enables women to live better lives by giving them a way to not have children if they are pregnant. So it's good in that it helps women to achieve their happiness. And you could say this of many things like food, clothing, and shelter, right? Would you put those in the good category? Well, they help us to live better lives. Or medicine, surgery, abortion, I guess, is a type of surgery. These are all things that help us to live good lives, so they're good in that sense. I could have put it as the right to an abortion. I don't know if that would sound better to you, but one thing I wanted to do with this list was keep it very brief. So abortion is shorter than right to an abortion. But I think it's not just the right that is good. And even that might be unclear. Like, what does it mean to have a right to abortion? Like, the state should provide it for you? Well, no. It just means that if you can pay for it yourself, then you can you can get one. It shouldn't be legally prohibited. But then you could also say that about food, clothing, and shelter. Should it be the right to food, the right to clothing, the right to shelter, rather than just food, clothing, and shelter? I don't think it's necessary to include that phrase, the right to. I think the good or service could still be regarded as good just in its own rights. So maybe, is that enough to address your question, Virtue Man? Feel free to follow up on that if you want, or object. Now, I don't have food, clothing, and shelter on my list of goods because I'm trying to keep it to more philosophical topics there. And abortion is not a philosophical topic in the way that some of the other things I have up there are, like reason, egoism, free will. But it is a very controversial topic, and that's a reason that I did want to include it. I wanted to include things that sparked people's interest and triggered discussion and debate. Okay. And I mean, you could say the same thing about technology, perhaps. Like, would you put technology in the good category? Well, you can abuse technology, right? Like a gun, right, is a piece of technology which could be used or abused. You could use it in self-defense, or you could use it to kill an innocent person, to murder somebody. Um, but would you say technology is not a good thing because it can be abused? Um, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that. Well, likewise with abortion, that could be abused, right? But it, if you use it for good reasons, then it's a good thing, just as technology is. So, all right. Well, let me go into some other chats. I see we have. Oh, Objective Ethics is here. Hello, and he came in with a super chat. Thank you. Appreciate that. He says, "Great to catch Dr. Norton live on YouTube. Give the show a like and subscribe, please." Thank you. I really appreciate that. OE. Let me see if I can reply quickly enough to get the tag. I think I did. Yeah, I appreciate that. Objective Ethics has been on my channel a number of times in the chat. He's also called in, and he interviewed me on his channel about a week ago, and thought we had a good discussion of capitalism and egoism. I appreciated that opportunity, so thank you for coming by. All right, now Knights of Templar says, "Okay, you are avoiding the question. That's not an honest way of debating." All right, well, you make me even less likely now that you said that to address what you said. I was talking about something before you came on, and you weren't first. And then someone put money behind the chat, so I skipped over to that. So if someone puts money behind the chat, I'm going to give that priority. They're offering me a lot of value here. So if you offered me value like that, I would go straight to yours. So do you want to take back what you said about it not being an honest way of debating? Maybe if you take that back, I'll address your question. I was going to go right to your question, actually. I was about to address your question, and then his super chat came in, and out of respect for the super chat, I went straight to it. You say, okay, I thought you were addressing my question. No, I didn't get to yours yet. All right, so why do I support abortion? Because the fetus has no rights. It's not an individual. Only individual human beings have rights. And a fetus or an embryo has not yet been individuated from the mother. So it's not an individual. Human beings are a type of individual. So there's no issue of rights for the fetus. Are you religious? I'm curious. Your profile picture has a cross in it, and your username is Knights of Templar. Is your you see same reasoning for slavery? No, slaves are individuals. Fetuses are not individuals. It's not a human, thus it does not deserve rights. Yeah, that's correct. Only human beings have rights. Animals don't have rights. That's my view. I'm trying to click on your profile. You just created your account last month or 2 months ago. It's a pretty new account. Yeah, you say? I guess that means yes, you are religious. I wonder if you support abortion or if you oppose abortion for religious reasons. Comparing a fetus to an animal is a category error. That's a logical fallacy. There's a similarity between animals and fetuses in that that is non-human animals and fetuses in that neither has rights. But there's a difference in that an animal, one that has been born, is an individual. Like a dog is an individual. It's not a human individual, but it has been individuated from its mother once it's born. It is its own thing out in the world. A fetus is not. So a born dog has a necessary condition of rights. It's an individual, but that's not a sufficient condition of having rights. It also has to be a human individual, not just any individual. A rock is an individual. It's a thing out in the world, but it's not a human individual. All right, we got 4 people here. And I've addressed all the chat so far. Anybody else want to do a chat or call? At what point is an abortion unacceptable? At no point. You can abort at any time during pregnancy because throughout the entire pregnancy, the fetus is not an individual. It's inside the mother the entire time. So it's never an individual. It never has rights. Once it's born, then it's an individual. But then there's no issue of abortion. At what point do you think abortion is unacceptable? Do you think it's unacceptable at any point? At any point before birth? All right. I'm caught up on the chat, waiting for new chats to come in. All right, here's a new one. So one could get an abortion mere days before birth. That baby within the womb is identical to a baby after birth, but you claim that at any point during pregnancy, an abortion is acceptable. Yeah, at any point. It's not a baby until it's born. It's a fetus or an embryo before it's born. It's a baby after it's born. A baby is a type of human, a young human being. But a human being is an individual. And when it's still in the womb, it's not an individual. It's not, so it's not identical. If they were identical, they would both be individuals, but they're not. And where would you, do you think all abortions are unacceptable from the moment of conception? But that baby is identical to a baby after its birth. No, it's not. One is an individual and one is not. So one is not a baby. It's a fetus. Are you going to tell me when you think abortion should be illegal? Is it from the moment of conception? Thanks for any likes or shares. Abortion is murder, he says. It doesn't matter how long the pregnancy has lasted. Okay. So you think it's murder. All right. So how about rape? Do you allow any exceptions like for rape? So I say it's not murder because it's not a human being. It's a fetus. But do you allow for any exceptions? No exceptions. Somebody shouldn't die because one person committed a crime. All right. Well, I say it's not a somebody. If that means a person or a human being, it's a fetus. Is your view based on religion? Do you think God implanted a soul in a zygote, and that's why it's a person? Or is your opposition to abortion independent of religion? This is an interesting stream idea. What made you want to do this? Says BR. I want to promote Ayn Rand's philosophy. I read Ayn Rand's many years ago, and I love her ideas. They make a lot of sense, and I think they're very important for living a good life. So I want to help spread her ideas to the world, and live streaming is a way for me to do that. Have you ever heard of Ayn Rand? I've been streaming a lot on TikTok recently, but I want to keep YouTube growing as well. So I decided to do a stream today. And I appreciate any financial contributions like OE did. If you want to help support the show, you can do a super chat or a super sticker. You say I never read her, but I've heard of her. I only really know the memes. Okay. Well, she has some very controversial ideas, and her ideas get distorted a lot, strawmans. So I think it's important to read her own writings to form a opinion of her. She wrote fiction and nonfiction, and I recommend starting with the fiction. Although I did not. I started with a nonfiction. But if you do that, you might get some plot spoilers, which is one reason I recommend starting with the fiction. The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged are her two most famous novels. She also wrote Anthem, which is a much shorter novel. And she wrote about abortion, among many other topics. But since that's what I've been talking about today a lot so far, I thought I'd mention that. She wrote an article called Of Living Death, which discusses the abortion issue. I think that might be free online, actually. Of Living Death. What's an important idea of hers in your view? One is that it's good to live for yourself and be selfish. She wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, which is a very provocative title because most people think selfishness is evil. But if you learn what she meant by selfishness, you'll see that it's not the conventional notion of someone who lies, cheats, steals, tramples over other people's rights, like Attila the Hun. She rejects that. She actually thinks that's a self-destructive way of acting. It's not in your self-interest. Are the comments limited? Nope. Why do you think they're limited? Or why do you ask that? Sometimes YouTube filters out comments using AI if it detects that there's some comment that violates terms of service. So I don't know if something like that happened to you. But I haven't deleted or limited comments. Have you seen the movie adaptation of Atlas Shrugged? Any thoughts on how closely it is to the book? I did see part one. So it came out in 3 parts. The book Atlas Shrugged has 3 parts. And there were, corresponding to that, there were 3 movies made. And I saw the movie for part one, and I thought it was pretty mediocre. Nothing like the book. I mean, it's a far cry. I would not recommend seeing the movie before reading the book. I thought part one was meh, not great, not horrible, but just kind of mediocre. So maybe I would give it a C if I were to grade it. But it wasn't good enough to make me want to see the movies for part 2 and part 3. So I never saw those. I heard from people who did see them that they were worse than part 1, and I didn't want to see those for that reason. But yeah, it just, there's no comparison between that and the book. I mean, the book, I think, is the greatest novel ever written, or at least it's a candidate for that. So I think it's high art, and it's just an incredible piece of work. And many people say it changed their lives. And they did adapt some things. Like, the novel was published in 1957, and there's I think there's a character who uses a cell phone, which wasn't really a thing back then, if I recall correctly. I think so. They made little changes. There might be more significant ones that I don't recall. I think this movie came out in 2011, part 1. So it's been 15 years. And I think one of the characters is black, who in the book is white, presumably, I guess. So it's not 100% faithful to the novel. But I don't think that necessarily is a bad thing. But I just mentioned that since you asked whether how closely it is to the book. For whom is it good to be? For whom is it good for me to be selfish? For you. That's the most important person. You. That's for whom it's good for you to be selfish. The most important thing in your life is to achieve your happiness. That's Rand's view. Your own happiness is the highest moral purpose. And to achieve that, you need to be self-interested. What could be more self-interested than achieving your own happiness? Isn't that the best possible thing for yourself? I think so. Now, other people can be part of that. Like, to achieve your own happiness, I think it's important to have other people in your life. Like a romantic partner, friends. They contribute to your life, though. Their values to you. So there's nothing in self-interest or selfishness that means you shouldn't have anything to do with other people. Quite the contrary. Other people can add enormous value to your lives. But the point of having other people in your lives is because they make your life better. So they are self-interested reasons. There are self-interested reasons to have other people in your life. It's not altruistic, right? You don't have other people in your life because it's good for their sake, but because it's good for your sake. And it will be good for their sake too, right? It's a win-win, right? So you both benefit. You like having them in your life, and they like having you in their lives. That's the way relationships, healthy relationships are. You're both benefiting from each other. And it's actually insulting to say, like, you're of no benefit to me, right? You add no positive value at all to my life, but I'm just going to have you be in my life as a kind of duty. Well, uh, that's kind of an insulting thing to say, right? Someone adds no value to you, yet you have them around. All right. Uzair says, I asked, how is capitalism good if it necessitates that someone has to live under a low wage, and if every human has intrinsic moral value, why would one be less than the other? Okay, well, I don't know why that chat got filtered out before. Um, I don't think YouTube normally filters that out. But anyway, let me say something about that. How is capitalism good? Well, first of all, what is capitalism? I think there's a lot of confusion of that. Like, a lot of people say we have capitalism today in the US, but I say no, we don't. Far from it. We have what's called a mixed economy. It's a mixture of freedom and coercion. Uh, Capitalism is a system of freedom, a system in which you are free to act on your own judgments, and you are not coerced by the state to give away your money through taxes, and you're not coerced through regulations. For example, minimum wage laws that coerce you to pay a certain amount to employees, even if you've come to a voluntary agreement with them as to some other amount you're going to pay them below the minimum wage. You're not allowed to do that. The government is going to force you to hire them at a certain amount, or you can't employ them at all. So maybe they're going to be out of a job because maybe you can't afford to pay them a certain amount. So because of regulations, the government is forcibly preventing someone from getting a job. Those are just some examples of the ways in which we have coercion today, but there's a multitude of ways. So a truly capitalist system is one in which the government does not coerce its citizens. And in other words, it respects their freedom to act as they choose to act, so long as they don't coerce other people. Like, if you're a criminal who coerces others, the government will step in and get that person off the streets, put them in jail. But as long as you're not coercing other people, you are free to act as you choose. So let me read a little more of your comment. You asked how is capitalism good if it necessitates that someone has to live under a lower wage, and if every human has intrinsic moral value. Okay, well, I don't understand what you mean by someone has to live under a lower wage. I mean, I think capitalism is a system in which is good for everybody, and people become wealthier under capitalism than under other systems. Not at the same rate. There's going to be inequality, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Inequality of rights is bad, but that's not what you have under capitalism. Inequality of wealth is fine. Not everyone is going to have the same wage or salary. Some people produce more value and they can earn more on a market. Steve Jobs, he creates huge amount of value compared to the janitor who works at Apple, right? So they both produce value, but Steve Jobs, as CEO, creates massively more value. So he gets paid much more. He's much more valuable in a free market. Much harder to replace him than it is to replace the janitor. He has a much more unique skill set running a huge technology company at the cutting edge of technology, pushing forward, revolutionizing the way we live. A janitor doesn't do that. He adds value, but not nearly the same kind of value that a brilliant CEO can add. So a market rewards you for the kind of value you produce, how much value you produce, not just how hard you work or how much you work. I could work all day digging holes in the ground and then filling them back up, but I haven't produced any value. So simply working hard or working long doesn't mean you've created value. But working smart, that's a way to produce value. And then you mentioned intrinsic moral value. Well, I think our own value is something we create. Like, no, I don't think people have intrinsic worth. Some people make themselves through their choices into good people, and some people make themselves through their choices into bad people. Like if you're a criminal, you've made bad choices. You've made yourself into a bad person. But if you're say you're a producer, you respect people's rights, you pursue your own life and happiness, then you've made choices that make you into a good person. So you're not intrinsically good or bad, but you make yourself into someone who is good or bad. All right, some more chats coming in. From BR. Can you explain selfishness again? If I act for someone else's benefit and to my detriment, costing me money or maybe physical safety, would you say I did it for selfish reasons because it satisfies some other desire of mine to be good or kind or whatever? Well, if your motivation was to benefit yourself, then it could be selfish even if it costs you money. I mean, whenever you buy something from the store, I go to a grocery store and I buy food. That costs me money, but that doesn't mean it's selfless. It's selfish. I'm benefiting myself. So just because you give up something, that doesn't make it selfless if the intention is to gain more than you give up. So it's a net gain, not a net loss. So if your intention is to come out better, to be better off as a result of your actions, then it is selfish, at least in Rand's sense of that term. or you could say it's self-interested. If you're acting for someone else's benefit, but okay, but then you add the part about to my detriment. Yeah, so if you're doing it to your own detriment intentionally, like that's your intention, is to do something that you think is resulting in you being worse off than had you not done the thing, then that would not be selfish. That would be selfless or self-sacrificial. But then you say in your next chat, because it satisfies some other desire of mine to be good or kind or whatever. So I think to determine whether it is selfish or selfless, you need to consider whether you expect and intend to be better net at the end than you were before. And you have to factor in not just material things like money, but also emotional or spiritual things like feeling good about yourself. Like maybe I give money to a charity. It makes me feel good to help out some cause. So even though I give up some money, I donate some money to a charity, I'm still better off at the end of it because I enjoy helping this organization out. I want to help them with their mission, and it makes me feel good to see them succeed. Or like with children, you raise children. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's such a selfless thing." No, you get tremendous joy and satisfaction from seeing your child grow and learn things and succeed in life. I mean, I think that should be the reason. If you're going to have children, it should be for self-interested reasons. It does cost you a lot. It costs a lot of money and time and effort, but you expect the rewards to outweigh all of that. You get so much joy and satisfaction and happiness from your children. At least that's the intention. I mean, hopefully it doesn't. They don't turn out to be monsters. But even if they do, so long as your intention is to get a lot of joy and happiness from it, I think it's still a selfish or self-interested thing to do. Okay. That's the latest chat. Maybe Knights Templar left. I asked him a question or two about whether his view is based on religion, but I don't think he ever answered that. Maybe he left or he's just listening silently. Anyway, I'm caught up in the chat. Sometimes it's hard for me to do that. Like there's more chats than I can handle. But today I've been able to keep up with the chat, especially when I get a call. Like when someone calls in, then it's hard for me to also look at the chat. So that's often what causes me to get behind. But I haven't gotten any calls today, so I've been able to keep up with the chat. He ran, says Objective Ethics. Yeah, maybe he did. Oh, I gotta plug in my laptop. Battery's getting low. All right. All right, so what's next? What are we going to talk about next? I saw your video about charts that you put up. OE, Objective Ethics, on his channel, he put out a video about channels on YouTube that he finds useful, something like this. And I saw the one where he talked about charts, like wall charts, which lay out the history of something. I have something like that. I don't know if you can. I've tried to show it before on the screen, but because of my virtual background, it's kind of hard to show. But I can try to show at least a wall chart of world history. It's this huge book which you can open it up and unfold it into like a 20-foot long stream of time, and it shows broken down by country, and it's very good for visualizing the history of the world. I use that a lot when I study history. Useful Charts is a great resource. OE says, I will be featuring your channel as well in that series. Oh, nice. I appreciate that. Thank you. I am adding a new channel each week, he says. Okay. All right. Appreciate that. Now, he's a member. He's got that star by his name. He's a channel member, and that's how he got that star. So if you want to be a channel member, you can click that join button on my channel and become a member at various levels. And I started to make some videos members only. I've only done a couple of those so far, but I think I will likely do some more members only videos. And sometimes what I might do is change the status. Like this video is not members only, this live stream, but I could make it members only after the live stream. So maybe I'll experiment with doing that. But anyway, if you want to get access to any members only contents, you can and support the channel, you can click that join button. All right, Kudababa's here. Hello. Is there a Kindle version of that? I don't know. I don't know. I would guess there's at least a PDF somewhere. I don't know if there's a way to get access to it though. All right. Yeah, it is a cool chart. I use it a ton when I study history. Okay, there's another chat from you that I skipped over. I think I'm wanting to ask, why ought I be selfish? Why should I aim for that? As opposed to, say, wanting to increase net satisfaction among all people with no special regard to myself. Okay. Well, I think that question is like asking, why ought I be happy or pursue my own happiness? Because I think that's really what selfishness consists of. The most selfish thing you could do is become happy. There's nothing better than that. If you know something better than that, let me know. Because I would want to hear about it. But I think that's the highest good. Aristotle regarded happiness as the highest good. He used the term eudaimonia. That was the Greek term. Sometimes it gets translated as flourishing or happiness. And I just don't think there's any better experience than that. So I don't know what I can say to persuade you that that's something you ought to pursue. I mean, just it's a type of pleasure, and maybe that's happiness. I wouldn't say is equivalent to pleasure. They're not the identical concepts, but I think happiness is a type of pleasure, the highest type of pleasure. I mean, you could get pleasure as an infant from drinking your mother's milk, but I don't think that's the same thing as happiness. That's more of a sensory physical kind of pleasure that causes that's caused by like something contacting your taste buds. So there's physical touch involved, but there's psychological pleasures. Excuse me. Need a cough drop. There's psychological pleasures like the joy of spending time with a friend or a loved one. There's not really physical pleasure necessarily. You could just be having a very pleasant conversation, but it could be very enjoyable. So there's psychological pleasures as well as physical pleasures, and I think happiness is a type of psychological pleasure, a very deep, profound type of pleasure, and I think it's just self-evident as to why it's worth pursuing. All I can say is, have some pleasure and experience what it's like to have pleasure, and then imagine like the most intense form of that. Um, and that's what I think is worth pursuing. What one ought to pursue. But I'm not sure if there's an argument for that as to opposed to it just being a self-evidently good thing. I think sex is actually the most intense form. So I did say happiness is a psychological pleasure, but sex it combines both physical and psychological pleasure. At least at its best. I mean, you could have like a meaningless physicalistic sex with a prostitute, and it maybe you get some physical satisfaction from that, but maybe you also experience psychological pain. Maybe it's degrading um, to have that sort of sex. But if you do it right, if you have at its best, like if you're having sex with someone who you really love, then it's a combination of psychological and physical pleasure, the most intense kind of pleasure you can have. Um, so why ought one pursue that? Well, if you have it, you'll know why it's worth pursuing. It kind of sells itself. And as to why you should prioritize yourself as to other people, because you're you, right? Why would you, if you are you, doesn't it make sense to want your pleasure? Like, why would you treat your own pleasure equivalently to other people's pleasure as utilitarians do, where you're treated as just one among all the consciousnesses in the universe, and the good is just to maximize the pleasure of all those consciousnesses? But why do that? Why should you care equally about other people and yourself? That doesn't make any sense to me. You're you. That's why you should care about your pleasure. Who cares about the net satisfaction among all people? If it doesn't do you any good, why would you care about it? Like, if you could increase net satisfaction, but at the cost of your own life and happiness, let's say, I don't think this is true, but just as a hypothetical, let's say that you could somehow contribute to the net satisfaction of the world by offing yourself, by committing suicide. Would you do that? What would be the point of that? That would be, um, you're just living for others, prioritizing others over yourself. But why do that? OE says, even if you choose to prioritize others, you are ultimately doing what you deem to be most valuable. Thus, in helping others, you are still serving yourself. Well, most valuable to whom? I'm not sure you are serving yourself. You're ultimately doing what you deem to be most valuable. But if it's most valuable to others, then are you really serving yourself? I don't think you are. I think you're harming yourself. If you prioritize others over yourself. And I think it's a contradiction to say, well, I'm prioritizing others because it's best for me. Okay, but then are you really prioritizing others if your reason for doing it is because it benefits you? Such that if you didn't think prioritizing others benefited you, then you wouldn't do it. It seems like you're not really prioritizing others if the reason for doing it is to benefit yourself. But if that's not what you're saying, if you're just saying you deem it to be most valuable, but it's not most valuable to you, then I don't think you are still serving yourself. So valuable always, there's an implicit to whom attached to that. Rand makes this point. Value implies or presupposes an answer to the question to whom something is a value and for what is it a value. There's nothing that's just valuable, period. Values are agent relative. They're things that are valuable for someone. And this is where I can bring in the term stance dependent, which I don't really like, and I don't think in terms of that. But a lot of people today talk about values in terms of, or goodness being stance dependent or stance independent. And since I know you have gotten involved in debates like that, I thought I'd bring in that terminology here. We talked about that some before. BR says, yes, exactly. Why should I care more about me more than others? You're saying it's bad or maybe irrational to put myself first, if I'm understanding correctly. Oh, yeah, to not put yourself first. Yeah, I think it's bad and irrational to not put yourself first. Yeah, there's no reason to do that. What you say, why should I care about me more than others? Because you're you. I don't care about you more than others. But that's because I'm me. I do care about me more than others. I don't know that I can argue for that. I think it's just, I don't know if I should say it's axiomatic or self-evident as to why I should care about myself. I don't think it's coherent to care about anything if you don't care about yourself first. Like, I can care about others, and I do care about others. But that's because I care about myself, and they are values to me. Others are values to me. If I didn't care about myself, what difference would it make to me if others are... I mean, others aren't a value to me if I don't value me, right? Like, if other people bring me joy and happiness to have them in my life, but I don't value my own joy and happiness, then it doesn't make sense for me to value others. What do you think about pleasure? Is pleasure good? I think that's our first experience with the concept good. Like an infant, they drink their mother's milk, and that gives them some pleasure, and that's where they start to get the idea of good from, that pleasurable experience. And notice that it's not just pleasure, it's their own pleasure that they're experiencing. They don't experience somebody else's pleasure, they experience their own pleasure. So their concept of good, I think, is based on that egoistic. Well, I don't know if that's the word I want to use here. Um, there's an implicit for me in the concept of good. So their concept of what is good is based on their early experiences of their own pleasure, and they get the idea that what is good is what brings me pleasure. So why would that concept of goodness ever become divorced from their own pleasure? The child, as it grows up, it learns that various things can be means of acquiring their own pleasure. What would be an example? A rattle. Maybe a child likes to play with a rattle. It brings it joy. So it reaches out to grab the rattle because the rattle gives it pleasure. And well, I don't, I'm not sure how much I should build on this example, but I'm trying to point out that if we go back to the beginning of our lives, to the time when we're infants, um, that's where we start to form a concept of what good means. And I don't, and that concept of good is self-directed. It's not like the infant treats itself equivalently to all the other beings in its environment, um, and thinks its own pleasure is equally good to the pleasure of the other beings in its environment. It doesn't even know other things are conscious yet, right? It takes a while for an infant to learn that there are other conscious beings in the world. So, where in a human being's development would it come up with this idea that its own pleasure is of equal importance to it as some other being's pleasure? I think I think you should have a reason if you're saying I ought to do it. I can acknowledge the psychological process that makes me value others because of selfish reasons, but my selfish reasons might make me value two people more than one me. Why ought my selfish reasons make me value one me more than two others? Because you're you. I don't know what to say. I don't think it matters if it's two people or a million people. I don't think it makes sense to value any number of people more than it makes sense to value yourself. Why would it make sense to value other people more than you? The reason is just it's yours, I guess. I'm not sure what else to say. You say, I think you should have a reason if you're saying I ought to do it. Well, the reason is that it's your pleasure or your happiness. And there's no reason to pursue someone else's pleasure or happiness at the expense of your own. Maybe we're just hitting ethical ground bedrock here. And I'm not sure what more I could say. I had this sort of discussion with my advisor, my PhD advisor. It's actually in a YouTube video on my channel. If you look up the Selfishness Project episode number 20, you can see it. And it wasn't just with him that this has come up. I've had this sort of discussion a number of times. Every time you eat food, I mean, you could be giving that food away to somebody else. And if you valued yourself equally to others, then maybe you should just flip a coin as to whether you eat food as opposed to giving the food away to somebody else. Isn't the reason that you eat it yourself that you value yourself most? Or is the only reason you're eating food so that you can stay alive to serve others? If so, why? Why would you have that goal? Why do you think you exist to serve others? Why is that better than serving your own interests? Sounds like you might be either a utilitarian. Who says the good is that which, whatever achieves the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Which is not egoism. I wonder what OE thinks about utilitarianism. Like if you had to classify yourself if you want to, obviously. You don't have to say here if you don't want, but I just thought about that. I don't think I've heard you say that you're a moral realist, I think. But that's a different sort of issue than whether you're a egoist or a utilitarian or an altruist or something else. That's so the moral realism, I think that's more of a meta-ethical classification, whereas egoism versus utilitarianism versus altruism. I think that's maybe more of a normative ethical classification. My selfish reasons might make me value two people more than one me. Well, if it's selfish reasons, then I don't I don't think you really can value two people more than you, because whatever the most selfish thing to do is whatever benefits you the most. All right, OE says, I'm not a utilitarian because of moral equivocation. One person who invents the cure for cancer may be more valuable than 100 ditch diggers, but we would have to be omniscient to know what actual value each ditch digger brings to the world. Hmm. So it's for epistemic reasons, like you can't know what's going to lead to the greatest happiness to the greatest number, and therefore it's not a good standard to live your life by. Well, what if we do this hypothetical and say that suppose you could know that by taking some action, it would lead to a net increase in happiness in the world, but a net decrease for your own happiness. Then do you think it would be good to do the thing if it leads to a net increase in world happiness, but a net decrease for your own happiness? I'm not sure that's coherent, actually, because I think if the world knew, if people in the world knew that you were sacrificing your own happiness for their sake, that should make the world at large unhappy. People shouldn't be happy for that others are sacrificing themselves. Okay, I guess a couple new chats here. Well, me being selfish to moderately satisfy a desire could still greatly satisfy the desire of another. Does that make sense? I might forego greater satisfaction while still gaining some satisfaction. Okay. I see what you mean. But is that ever good to do? That's what I am wondering, like, what is it? Is it always best to maximize your own satisfaction or your own happiness rather than settle for something less than the best? I don't see right now that it's ever better to settle for less than the best. Oe says, I think we should build our principles on things we can actually measure. That's why I think virtue ethics from Aristotle's model of the golden mean are more useful in moral progress. I'm not familiar with virtue ethics, at least under that label. And you're relating that to Aristotle. So the golden mean, that's one area where Rand differs from Aristotle. She identifies 7 virtues. The classic 4 virtues in the ancient worlds are wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, I think. And Aristotle saw those as a means, like courage is having the right amount of, not too much fear, that would be cowardice, but not too little fear, that would be foolhardiness or recklessness. But if you have the right amount, then you have the virtue of courage. But on Rand's approach, she didn't see her. She identified 7 virtues, and she didn't see them as a mean between extremes. Like for her, the 7 virtues she identifies are rationality, independence, integrity, honesty, justice, productiveness, and pride. And rationality is the fundamental virtue. All the others are just aspects of rationality. They're different ways of being rational. And as for rationality, she didn't think like you should be a little bit irrational, but not too irrational. Just the right amount of irrationality, and that's what we call rationality. No, it's a binary. Either you're rational or you're irrational. And I mean, there can be degrees in some sense. Like one person can be very rational, and someone else can be moderately rational. Maybe sometimes they succumb to lapses of irrationality, and maybe some other people are irrational characteristically, like all the time. It's not just an occasional lapse, but so there can be degrees of rationality in that sense. But in any given moments, we can choose to exercise our reason or not, and just succumb to our emotions. And maybe that's more of a binary then. If you're just well, there are degrees of awareness. The Rand does make that point. Like you can have a mind that's fully in focus, and then a mind that's completely out of focus and maybe something in between. I'm not sure though. Anyway, maybe that's unnecessarily complicating things, but my point was just that um, the way Rand understands virtue, it's not a mean between two vices. Rationality is just, I guess you could think of it as it's totally good, and it's not like you can be too rational, have too much rationality or something. No, it's completely good. You shouldn't be even a little bit irrational. Any amount of irrationality is bad, and more of it is worse. But that doesn't mean any of it is good. Um, and food and poison is an analogy she gives. Um, so there's irrationality is like poison, and rationality is food. And there's no good amount of poison, right? Maybe some poison is more harmful than others if you ingest a lot of poison versus a little, but all of it is bad, right? There's no good amount of poison. Likewise, any amount of irrationality is bad. All right. Let me see the new chats. I think self-respect is a necessary property of achieving a good life. And I believe we all want to live a good life ultimately. Virtue ethics is the most practical way to attain self-respect. Okay. Well, I don't think we all want to live a good life. I don't think everyone is aiming at their own good. I think some people are nihilists who know that the way they're acting is not good for themselves, yet they act that way anyways. And even if you're not a full-blown nihilist, you can still do this on a small scale, even if you're someone who normally is trying to pursue your own well-being and happiness. There might be certain moments where you cave into some irrational desire, and then you think back later and you say, I regret doing what I did. I really wasn't doing what was best for myself. A common example of this is you're on a diet and you cave into temptation and eat something you're not supposed to eat, and then you put on weight as a result, or even worse, maybe you get a heart attack. Your doctor told you shouldn't be eating this food, yet you ate it anyways, and then you end up having some medical problems. And I think many people can succumb to this, even if you're not a nihilist. We can all succumb to temptation, and I think in those instances where you do, you're not. Assuming it's irrational. I think in those instances where you cave into some irrational desire, you're not trying to live a good life. You're giving up on the goal of living a good life. You're placing some out of context desire above your well-being. So to consistently aim at a good life requires consistently making good choices. And I won't go into free will right now. I know that's another area where we got some differences, OE and I. All right, BR. Says, I incline to virtue ethics too, but I definitely don't know enough about it to have an opinion. Regards settling, as regards settling for less, would it at least not be bad to be moderately satisfied and making someone else very satisfied? Like going to someone's birthday party instead of doing my favorite hobby. And Will Marino says, I'm back, Dan. I missed you. Oh, thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm back. I remember seeing you here once before. All right, well, you mentioned going to someone's birthday party instead of doing your favorite hobby. And I guess going to the birthday party, in your example, is moderately satisfying, but it makes the person whose party you attend very satisfied. Would it be bad to do that? I think it would be bad if you're prioritizing their interest over yours. Like if you could be happier not going to their birthday party, if that would be better for your life, then I think it would be bad. Even if you get moderate satisfaction and it gives them a lot of satisfaction, even if they become very satisfied, if it comes at the cost of your overall well-being, I do think it's bad, because I think your own life and happiness is the standard of good and bad. So whatever contributes the most to that is the good thing to do. And any choice that leads away from that is the bad thing to do. And some choices might be worse than others, right? Some might be more bad than others, but I think if you are knowingly doing something that is not maximizing your own happiness, I think that's bad. At least I'm not convinced it's not bad. But it could be the case that you derive satisfaction from making somebody else happy. And that's something to take into account. But then how much satisfaction do you get from that? And is it as much satisfaction as you could get if you didn't try to make them happy by going to their party, for example? OE says, I've heard people say that, but it sounds self-refuting to say, I don't want to live a good life. Why is it self-refuting? Is the idea that anything someone wants to do is something they necessarily think is best for them? There is a view called psychological egoism. According to which people necessarily do what they think is best for themselves. So even classic examples of altruistic people like Mother Teresa will, according to this this theory, psychological egoism, even Mother Teresa will be regarded as self-interested, selfish. Is that what you have in mind? Because she did what she wanted to do. That's what they'll say. She wanted to do what she did, so she thought that's what was best for her. Would you make that kind of claim about Mother Teresa or self-flagellating monks in the Middle Ages? People who went out into the desert or stood on top of a pillar for years. The ascetics, were they being self-interested because they did what they wanted to do? Are you using your free will to choose not to talk about free will? Or did you choose that because you were influenced by the external experience of our disagreement? I use my free will. I exercise my reason. And I was getting the sense that it would be too much of a jump in topic to shift over to free will. It seemed like the rational thing to do was to just set that topic aside for now. Whereas if I were just going by my emotions, maybe I would have started talking about it. But I was monitoring introspectively signals from my subconscious as to what would be the best direction to go in. So I would say I was using my free will. That choice to monitor the goings on in my mind, that's something that I have control over. I was managing my mind. Because most people think living a good life is getting what they want. So it's self-refuting to say getting what I want isn't living a good life according to my own values. If getting what I want is living a good life, how can living a bad life, if I want to actually be living a bad life, be bad? Since I got what I wanted. Well, one thought here is there's different levels at which you can want things. Like if we take the diet example, you want the cheesecake, but you also want a healthy body, and you want to not get a heart attack. But those wants can come into conflict. Now, which one do you want more? What's your deepest value? If you're Now it might be that although you want both the cheesecake and your health, you want your health more deeply. That's a bigger value to you. Yet you cave in to the temptation of the smaller value, and then you regret it later. You say, no, I didn't do what I thought was best for me. Now you might say, well, I did what I really wanted. Maybe you would say that. So is the idea that whatever someone does, that's necessarily what they most wanted, their strongest wants? Um, Maybe it was in the moment, but um, another thought here is just doing what you want isn't in the moment doesn't mean you're doing what's best for you. Let me refresh this chat. So maybe you could say people always do what they most want to do in the moment, but they don't always do what they rationally think or rationally judge to be best for them. So maybe those can come apart. What someone judges to be best for them when they're thinking rationally isn't necessarily the same as what someone most wants to do in a given moment. And if you suspend your power of thinking rationally, if you let your mind go out of focus, then I think you are more likely to end up doing something which, when you are thinking rationally, you wouldn't judge to be best for yourself. So I'm a little hesitant on this phrasing here. Most people think living a good life is getting what they want, because people can have irrational wants. So I think maybe I would put it more as living a good life is living in a way that enables you to achieve happiness, not just getting what you want, regardless of whether getting what you want leads to happiness. So maybe this is a more narrow picture. It doesn't include happiness here. It just talks about wants. All right, BR says, interesting. I think I have no insight to why you think this way, to be honest. I get I'm only ever me, but just because I have blinders on to your experience Why should I only value what I see? Seems arbitrary. All right, I think we're just at an impasse. At least I don't know what to say. I mean, even if you don't have blinders onto my experience, even if you know that I do have experiences, and I know that you have experiences. I don't doubt that. I don't have blinders onto that, but I just don't value your experiences the way I value my experiences. I just see no reason why I should value your experiences equivalently to my experiences. At least the experience of pleasure. I don't see why I should value your experience of pleasure equivalently to my experience of pleasure. But I don't know what more I can say on that. Does anybody else share my idea on this, my stance on this, or BR's stance on this? Like go extreme, are we saying a sociopathic true believer concentration camp guard ought to kill someone trying to escape if it genuinely gives him the greatest happiness? Yes. Now, this is what I think is a silly hypothetical, which often comes up. People will say, what if doing this really sociopathic thing leads to your happiness? Should you do it? I'll say, yeah, you should. But as a matter of fact, I don't think sociopaths are happy people. Now, if we're talking about non-sociopaths, I think it would be terrible for them to kill innocent people. What do you think? Do you think it would be I'm assuming you're not a sociopath. Do you think it would be in your interest? Now, I think most people will say no. But why bring in the sociopath? Of what relevance is that to you or me who are not sociopaths? I think the point of ethics is to guide your own life. It's not to come up with some universal duty that has to guide every being in every scenario. Like let's say a bear. Let's take a bear. A bear in the woods. A bear is hungry and it attacks a human being. And given its nature, is that a bad thing for it to do? Would it be irrational for me to say, I understand the bear, I endorse the bear's attacking a human being if it's hungry, because that's how it survives. Maybe prey doesn't come around too often, so the bear has to take advantage whenever it can find some food. So should we blame the bear for killing a human being? No, that's just the bear's nature. Well, likewise, if we talk about a sociopathic human being, which we stipulate its nature is such that the only way for it to achieve its well-being is to attack non-sociopathic human beings, or maybe other sociopathic ones, then I wouldn't blame the sociopath just as I wouldn't blame the bear for attacking an innocent human being. They just have that's their nature. BR says, wow. What if we stipulate that the way to achieve the greatest happiness of the greatest number is to murder innocent people? So now we're utilitarians in this example. Should you murder innocent people? Well, yeah, you should, according to the utilitarian. But then the utilitarian will say, oh, well, it's crazy to think that murdering innocent people would lead to the greatest happiness, the greatest number. Well, I think it's crazy to think that murdering innocent people would lead to your own greatest happiness. Even if you are a sociopath, I don't think sociopaths can be happy. Maybe they can get a sick, twisted kind of pleasure, but that's not happiness. This is how I apply the golden mean. When we give a value, I believe the most value is extracted between excess and deficiency. Being irrational is deficient because it leads to reckless behavior. Over-rationalization prevents a person from taking reasonable chances or even acting at all. Well, then it sounds like it's not really rational. Because it would be irrational to just forever think about something when action is demanded by the circumstances. So sometimes the rational thing to do is to stop reasoning and to act. Interesting, we seem to have, say, sociopaths. We seem to have to say sociopaths can't be happy in order to avoid the conclusion. People do, in fact, gain happiness from killing or hurting others. If your thought can't accommodate this, I'd be concerned. I don't think they can, from at least, okay, if we're talking about innocent people, I don't think you can get happiness from killing them. I mean, if you kill someone in war, like people, like if Israel kills Hamas, um, maybe they could get some happiness from that because they're killing evil people. But if we're talking about killing innocent people, I don't think you can get happiness from that. Maybe you can get a sick, twisted pleasure. I don't doubt that. Like people who torture animals, I, I, I suspect they get a sick and twisted kind of pleasure, but not what I would call happiness. Happiness is a very deep, profound emotion, um, and I think it trivializes what happiness is to think that the type of people who would get shits and giggles or kicks and giggles from torturing an animal or killing an innocent person to equate that with happiness, I think really um, does injustice to what actual happiness is. But if you just want to stipulate as a hypothetical that sociopaths can achieve this kind of very deep, profound, positive feeling that I think is genuine happiness by killing innocent people, and you just say, well, if it's the case that they can achieve that, and the only way for them to achieve that is by killing innocent people, would you then say they should kill innocent people? Then I say, yeah, they should. I think it's pretty absurd to think that they could actually achieve that. But if you just want to stipulate that as part of your hypothetical, then okay. But I don't think that's like a bullet I need to bite. I think it just is a pretty silly hypothetical. What is happiness? Uh, I think this would be a good time for me to pull up the Ayn Rand lexicon and read a passage from Ayn Rand about this. Maybe I'll end on this. Happiness, that would be a pretty good note to end on. Okay, there's a few passages here, and they're pretty long, so I'm not going to read all of this, but let me just read a little. Um, I'll share this on the screen too. Let's see, is this the right? I want to make sure I share the right window here. Let's see, how do I... Oh, that was the wrong window. Okay, I think I found the correct one. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So this is the Ayn Rand lexicon. It's a collection of Ayn Rand's passages from Ayn Rand's writings, and sorted by alphabetical order. It's a great resource. And here's the entry for happiness. So let me read a little of this. Actually, I'm going to do a search for one. There's one phrase in particular Non-contradictory joy. Yeah. Let me read this part. Happiness is not to be achieved at the command of emotional whims. Happiness is not the satisfaction of whatever irrational wishes you might blindly attempt to indulge. Happiness is a state of non-contradictory joy, a joy without penalty or guilt, a joy that does not clash with any of your values and does not work for your own destruction. Not the joy of escaping from your mind, but of using your mind's fullest power. Not the joy of faking reality, but of achieving values that are real. Not the joy of a drunkard, but of a producer. Happiness is possible only to a rational man. The man who desires nothing but rational goals, seeks nothing but rational values, and finds joy in nothing but rational actions. Should I read this next paragraph? Yeah, this is from one of the characters in her novels. I won't say who it is. And he goes on, just as I support my life neither by robbery nor alms, but by my own effort, so I do not seek to derive my happiness from the injury or the favor of others. Maybe like the psychopath. That's my interjection. But earn it by my own achievement. Just as I do not consider the pleasure of others as the goal of my life, so I do not consider my pleasure as the goal of the lives of others. Just as there are no contradictions in my values and no conflicts among my desires, so there are no victims and no conflicts of interest among rational men. Men who do not desire the unearned and do not view one another with a cannibal's lust. Men who neither make sacrifices nor accept them. All right, well, that gives you hopefully a better idea of what I had in mind by happiness, true happiness, that passage. So. All right, so let me just look at last chats here, and then I'm going to wrap it up for today. So BR says, unfortunately, I know people with antisocial personality disorder can indeed get a lot from hurting others. Okay, well, I don't think they get what Ayn Rand described as happiness. Again, people can get a sick, twisted kind of pleasure, and I don't doubt that people with who you're talking about here can get that, but I don't think they get non-contradictory joy, a joy without penalty or guilt, as Ayn Rand put it. I'm very skeptical of that. Okay. And then you say, thanks for the chat. It was fun. Have a good day. All right. Thanks. I appreciate that. Likewise to you. Have a good day. All right. And thanks for any likes on the stream. That'll help promote it in the algorithm. Thanks for watching or listening later. Thanks for any shares, comments, and super chats. Thank you, OE, for that super chat from earlier. All right. Good night, everyone. And I wish you a happy, egoistic rest of your day.